Hey, this is Broadway of the Manhattan Clan, and you're listening to Voices from the Eyrie. And now I'm off to prepare for a romantic dinner for me and Angela, and then we're going to curl up in front of the fireplace with a good book.
The story is told, though who can say if it be true, of a clan of medieval warriors awoken in modern-day Manhattan, of the animated series that told their story.
It is an age of darkness. Superstition and the sword rule. It is an age of fear. It is the age of gargoyles.
Welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast.
Welcome back to Voices from the Eyrie. I'm your co-host, Greg Bashansky, and joining me as usual is my partner in crime, my other co-host, Jennifer L. Anderson.
Hello, everyone.
And with luck, God willing, this particular episode of Voices from the Eyrie won't get pulled from rotation for a decade and then a censored version added. And I would like to introduce the co-creator of Gargoyles, Mr. Greg Wiseman.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm very happy to introduce a very special guest, the voice of Broadway himself, Mr. Bill Fagerbakke.
Hi.
We're so glad to have you. It's a real honor. We had Tom Adcox 2 shows ago. We had Jeff Bennett last show. So 3 for 3, all 3 members of the trio.
It's such a thrill to get all 3 of you guys. So happy.
My brothers.
Yes.
Your Rookery brothers, yes. So Bill, we would like to get to know you for a little bit. How did you get into acting, particularly voice acting?
Well, I stumbled into theater when I was in college, actually, and I just quit football. And that was just good fortune on my part. So I studied theater, went to New York, did theater mostly, then got a sitcom called Coach, and so I moved out here, and a couple years into that, my agent called me and said, hey, there's a cartoon that wants a dog to sound like your character on Coach. Do you want to go in and read for it? And I just thought, well, if I don't get it, wouldn't that be terrible? And but I did wind up getting it, and that was a cartoon called Beethoven, which was based on the movie about the Saint Bernard, and that was a Saturday morning cartoon, and that's showing my age, I guess. There used to be this thing called Saturday morning cartoons, so that was my first cartoon gig. Okay, got it. And then, happily for me, I started auditioning for more, and was lucky enough to get cast in Gargoyles, which was my I'm pretty sure that was my second animated series, and got to meet Greg and be a part of his creation.
Awesome.
I have to confess that I lived in Southern California at the time, and we used to go all the time to watch tapings of Coach.
No way, really?
All the time. It was one of our favorite things to do. I loved it.
Oh, wow. Cool. We've been in the same room together several times.
Several times, yes. And you lived to tell about it. I'm very happy.
Yeah, I remember Coach. I used to catch reruns of it in syndication in the early 90s. It would come on after Cheers on my local affiliate.
Because he's young and we're old.
I'm not that young. Not anymore.
Just watching something in syndication dates you, I think.
Let's talk about the development of Broadway as a character and what you brought to the part. Greg, Bill, this is for both of you.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before, the casting process, but, Bill and Tom Adcox were the keys to us, figuring out at all what a gargoyle sounded like. We, created the show, and we had no idea what sort of gargoyle sound. And Tom came in, and he's got this gravel in his voice, but he's higher pitched. And Bill came in with that same kind of gravel, but obviously at the low end. And suddenly we're like, well, of course, gargoyles have a bit of gravel, of course they do. And that was, extremely important to our whole casting process all the way down the line. And in terms of Broadway, where we started with the character in our comedy development, was just, okay, he's the big, strong, goofy one who likes to eat. But Bill brought so much humanity, in essence, to the role that Broadway quickly sort of evolved into something much more, someone with much more depth to him. And so, for example, when, Angela joined the cast and at first it seemed like all three of the trio were interested in her. We had this long discussion, Gary Sperling and I, about who do we think she would ultimately go for, if any of them. And it just became clear that, Broadway was the one with the most sensitivity, the one that would appeal to her the most. And that, in essence, is something that Bill brought to the role, because we started out with a guy who just liked to eat a lot. And obviously we were never planning to keep it there as being that shallow, but Bill helped us find the direction to go.
Wow, it's always interesting to hear the production perspective on that, because when you're on the performing side, you're just in there with your fellow cast members, trying to dive into and live in the dialogue and the words on the page, and they put together such a great cast. And of course, Keith David was just an epic. He was like the foundation for everything, the way I saw it. And and getting to work with Jeff and Tom and Jeff, who is, just one of the rock stars, one of the incredible talents of voiceover. He's in a very small group. So there's him and his versatility. And then, and I think Tom and I were most kind of just like we were in our lanes, and we just got to work off of each other. And as with everything you do when you're an actor, it's all about the writing. Where does the writing take you? And most animation, you don't always get a strong sense of growth and development. And we sure did with Gargoyles. It was very fulfilling.
Yeah, like Broadway very much starts off like that stereotype that they were talking about, but he ends up just being, there's so many more layers to him, and he's just got the biggest heart of all of them, and just so lovable and so smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Broadway is definitely the epitome of don't judge a book by its cover for various reasons we've described. Most of the fandom, well, pretty much all the fandom latched onto him pretty quickly. Every now and then he gets someone who just looks at him on the surface and explain about the character, and then I'll say, watch a couple more episodes, please. He's a great, very multi-layered character. I love him. He's terrific. I mean, and I'm a little bit biased because I portrayed him in one of the radio plays at the Gathering of the Gargoyles conventions we had. I did nowhere near as good a job as you, Bill, not even in the same galaxy, but I have an affection for the character.
Oh, that's great. I hope you enjoyed that.
I did.
This particular episode was pretty intense.
Yeah.
The whole subject of it was completely like not something that you were seeing on TV, especially, the afternoon cartoons and stuff like that. Greg, what made you think that this was an episode that needed to be made?
I think it was a discussion with, it started as a discussion with Michael Reed. And, we wanted to do, coming out of the pilot, we very consciously wanted to do one episode each that focused on Lexington, Brooklyn, and Broadway. And for Broadway's story, there is something, and I don't think of this as shallow, but there's something childlike about Broadway that I think, a positive.
In a sense.
Yeah. And so the idea that he would, that things like going to the movies is something new for him. And that the dividing line between what's real about a movie and what's fake, the sort of harmlessness of violence, was interesting to us. And the idea that this idea about gun safety was just sort of running around in, I think, both Michael and our heads, because we had rules about what we could do with guns and what we couldn't do with them. We weren't a network show, so we didn't have network BS&T, but Disney had its own BS&T executive, and we had a great one, actually, really, who understood what we were trying to do. Her name was Adrienne Bello. We've mentioned her before. And the whole idea is that we would show consequences. Not that we couldn't do violent stuff, but as long as we showed the consequences of that violence. But we also had limitations to what we could do with realistic guns, what you call imitatable behavior. And so the idea was to do the ultimate in horrible imitatable behavior, which is to show someone picking up a gun and playing with it like it were a toy. And we were going to show the consequences of it. And so Michael and I came up with this story, and we took it to Frank Parr, and he loved it. And then one of us, it might have been me, but it might have been one of the others, said, yeah, there's no way they're going to let us do this. And I said, that may be true, but I took it to our boss, Gary Kreisel. Bill, I don't know if you remember Gary, but he ran Disney TV animation back in the day. And he said, all right, well, tell me the story. And I told it to him, and he said, okay, go for it. And I think one thing that helped is that it isn't, I'm pretty anti-gun myself. I mean, flat out. I'm a liberal Jew from the San Fernando Valley, and I'm pretty anti-gun, but this episode is not. This episode is pro-gun safety, which I think is a subject that everyone can agree on, that, if you're an adult, you don't leave a gun just hanging around. And Elisa's kind of justified in her doing so because A, she's a cop, she has a good reason to have that gun, and B, she lives alone. It doesn't occur to her. She doesn't have kids in the house. She doesn't even have, a roommate. It doesn't occur to her that she needs to secure that gun. But adults should secure firearms, and kids should not be picking them up and playing with them as if they are toys. And that, I think, is something that pretty much everyone can agree on. And so it was at the time surprisingly non-controversial. We were sort of, shall we say, primed to receive all sorts of flack about the episode. And the reverse happened. We actually got this great write-up in TV Guide. And there's a story I could probably tell here, some stills here. I have no idea if you remember this. But the press back in the day were always on our side with Gargoyles. We always got great reviews, and we got great publicity for the show. Maybe not as much as I would have liked, but then what I found is that every producer always wishes the show got more publicity. But one of the main reasons that we got great publicity is that we did an event where we showed a clip at the Universal Sheraton. And attending the event was Gary Kreisel, my boss, myself, and three of our actors on the show, Ed Asner, Jonathan Frakes, and Bill. And Bill, do you remember this at all?
Yes, I do.
Ring any bell?
Unusual.
Right. So we showed this clip, and I had gotten them to get these huge speakers. I mean, just massive speakers for the space. And we pumped the volume all the way up and showed this clip, and it's really short. And it echoes out at the end with Goliath roaring and all this stuff. And when it ended, we had like pin drop silence from everybody. And it's one of these moments where you don't know, are they quiet because they are blown away or quiet because they're horrified, you know? And someone asked, one of the reporters attending asked the question whether, you know, this is clearly a very different kind of show for Disney. You know, is this appropriate for kids? Would you let your kids watch it? And, you know, it sort of goes down the line of us sitting up there and, you know, Ed's kids are my age. So, you know, and even Gary's kids were, you know, in their teens. So it was like no big deal. And Jonathan and I, our wives were both pregnant at the time, but we didn't have any kids yet. So that sort of left the question in Bill's court. And Bill, do you remember what you said?
I think so. You go ahead.
Bill goes, well, it's better than Barney. And this got a massive laugh. And I didn't really understand it at the time because I didn't have kids. But within a couple of years, I understood it exactly, which is that every parent who had suffered through hours and hours of Barney, and there were plenty of those in the audience of reporters we were facing, could relate to the idea of having anything to show their kids that was better than Barney. And from that point on, the reporters were always on our side. And so when this episode came out, we got a lot of good press, and then we were even written up in a book that was pretty negative about televised violence overall, but praised us because we showed the consequences of that violence. Not just in this episode, but in the episodes that follow. Elisa doesn't just come back in the next episode as if nothing had happened. She's still recovering physically, and the fact that she was shot causes her boss to change policy with her. She'd been previously working alone without a partner. Now she's assigned a partner, and the boss won't let her ditch that partner. And so that ability of us to show consequences, to build on the episodes that came before, specifically in this episode, got us a lot of praise. And so it was ironic when later, they took this episode out of the rotation for years and years. And then when they put it back, even now, I saw it last night on Disney Plus, and there were still edits.
No kidding.
Done. Yeah.
Cutting close so you don't see the blood, and then covering the blood in another scene.
Yeah, the first time we aired it, because we were so close to the wire in terms of getting it back from overseas and editing it and doing post-production and getting it on the air. First time we aired it, there was a lot of blood. There was too much blood. And Frank and I chose to change it. You know, when we had time to call retakes and got another take back, there was too much blood. And so from the second time it aired, there was less blood on the kitchen floor when Elisa goes down. And some fans were like, oh, they censored you. And we're like, no, we did that because we felt, we didn't want it just to be like, ooh, look at all the blood, you know, like, isn't that cool? We wanted it to be horrifying, not about the gore. And two, there was so much blood on the ground. It looked like she had completely bled out and that there was no way she could possibly survive this. And obviously she does survive it. But what I noticed last night is that, there are either shots where you're in incredibly tight. The picture doesn't hold up that well, when you push in that tight, because this was obviously produced long before HD, and watching this on an HD TV makes you cringe a little bit. So that you can't see the blood. Or there was another scene where the blood is colored black. So I think it's supposed to look like it's her long black hair on the floor. And you were like, wow, getting shot really makes your hair grow fast. Cause there's a lot of hair. But that was So it's interesting to me that this was a show that we got tons of praise for from family groups and all sorts of sources. Madeline Levine, again, wrote this book, Viewing Violence, which was very negative towards much of what was on TV, violence-wise, and yet very positive about our show. And yet, you know, they took it off the air for a long time. They'd only air it once a year on Halloween after midnight.
Good Lord. You're kidding.
I'm not. And,
right.
And now, even though
it's dispiriting.
Yeah, even now that it's in the rotation, they've altered it.
Went up.
I'm just happy that it's back in the rotation because for so long it wasn't.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. When the show first went up on Disney Plus, this was the first episode I checked, and it was uncensored for the first year. I don't know what happened, but the second year of Disney Plus, suddenly they posted the edited version. But the ironic thing about that is, if you watch Enter Macbeth right after this, it has a previously on Gargoyles recap. The shot of Elisa in a pool of her own blood is right there, uncensored.
Well, when it's really not even, it's about the point of the story, which was, what an ambitious, and relevant, episode of a cartoon, and how great that, you and Michael were able to proceed with it. That's really, that's so commendable. Cause we just kind of, we're just kind of, when we consume television, we consume, film, we consume other stories. We're just going along on this ride in the cradle of I don't know, what is it, almost 100 gun deaths a day in our country. And it's
right.
a part of our culture that is, it's so toxic, but yet it's also vital part of quote action, unquote stories, you know. So that's a wonderful, that was, I did, I watched it again. Thanks for the link. And, it was great to see what you accomplished there, Greg. Impressive. And I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Michael Reeves'
Thanks.
script.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it was a huge group effort. I mean, Michael wrote it, and we had great people in Japan animating it and directing it, and you guys performing it. I mean, there's some great stuff in there from you, of course, but, you know, Keith and Sally, both have just, you know, these heartbreaking moments, and
right.
Great support from everybody else, you know.
Well, the portrayal of the family is really effective, and affecting. That's such an important thing it's such an important value to write into that story, to portray that honest grief and shock, and then Broadway's not just guilt but shame. And of course, you know, the effect it has on Goliath, but showing the family was, I think, such, and you very easily could have written that episode without that. That could have, you know, but the fact that you had that value in the story was really powerful.
As an adult watching that for the first time, that moment when they ask, should we call in her sister from Arizona? Like that, like hits you. Like you're like, oh, this is serious. You know, it really was just that one line, like, got my attention hard.
Right.
I mean, this was an opportunity for us. I mean, this is Broadway's story, you know, and as with the previous stories, we wanted to see Broadway in relationship to Goliath, but it also really gave us an opportunity to flesh out Elisa's life, which we hadn't done up to this point. We'd seen that she was a cop, but she was a cop in essence in a vacuum. So we see her at work, and we see her being a cop outside of being the gargoyle's friend, we see her boss, and then we go to her house and we see, she owns a cat. How about that? Did you know that? And then, we put her in the hospital, and even before we put her in the hospital, we see the family picture on, in her apartment. It shows that she's got parents and she's got a brother and sister. And then, we meet, mom and dad, which played by, the amazing Nichelle Nichols and Michael Hort. And her brother Derek, played by Rocky Farrell. And then Maria Chavez, the boss, is Rachel Tickerton, and Dr. Sato was Robert Ito. I mean, this had a terrific guest cast. I mean, we have a great group of regulars, but one of the things that was also great about Gargoyles is that, the actors we brought in as guests on this show were just stunning. Just like, wow.
It was kind of a guess who's going to be the next, like the guest on this week, kind of like you're going to know the voice.
Yeah, what a treat to see all the different guest actors come through. That was really delightful.
And here, you just get tastes of them. It's not a big Maria Chavez episode or even a big Diane Mazza episode. But it gave us tastes of them, which allowed us to introduce them and build on them later. He doesn't have any lines, but you even see her future partner, Matt Bluestone, driving in the car with Maria midway through the episode. You don't know who that guy is. He's just some detective with boss, But you get we were able to plant that seed. And then later when people watch it a second time, they're like, oh my God, that actually appeared 2 episodes before he was actually introduced or something like that. I don't know. And that was always fun for us to plant the seed.
Love it. This episode also introduces Tony Dracon, who, in a lot of ways, he's kind of an opposite of Xanatos, where Xanatos is charming and draws you in. Dracon is sleazy, repulsive, and if you saw him walking down the street, you would cross the street to avoid him.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one where we felt that we wanted the villain of this episode because the episode was so real. The actual threat, which was Broadway shooting Elisa and Elisa coming close to dying, so real. We didn't want a sort of high fantasy or high science fiction quotient villain, for this episode. And we had always talked, Michael and I had always talked about, at some point we want to just bring in organized crime into this. This is Elisa's world. That's before she ever met a gargoyle. She was a detective who had to deal with organized crime. And so Dracon became, at least initially, our sort of stand-in for organized crime in Manhattan, in 1994. I guess that's what organized crime looked like in Manhattan in 1994. Looked like Richard Grieco playing Tony Dracon. But so I don't know how real it was, but it felt more real. In other words, even though we were dealing with these high-tech weapons, and I love the line about, the particle beam, that Owen's describing these particle beam weapons and the lasers just for aiming. I'm like, that's totally Michael Reed. Because I had no idea that lasers were useless. It was just sort of like, Michael's like, yeah, the actual beam is invisible. The laser's just for aiming. I'm like, sure, okay. Michael would research all that stuff and knew all that stuff. On Young Justice, Brandon is like that. All the science Brandon wants to get. Even though we're doing a show that's superheroes, guys like Michael and Brandon, they want to get the science as close to right as possible so that it sounds at least like we know what we're talking about. And I'm all in favor of that as long as I don't have to be the one to do the research.
Okay, Gargoyles has made a lot of use of real-life locations throughout the series so far, and here we see the Plaza Hotel, but you don't call it the Plaza Hotel, even though it's drawn exactly like the Plaza Hotel. You refer to it as the Park Manor Hotel. Were there any behind-the-scenes reasons for this? You couldn't get clearance on a name?
You can't use someone's business. They could sue you. I mean, it wasn't even like fight for a question on our part. It's like, okay, we're going to loosely base this on the plaza, but we'll call it the Park Manor. And that'll be our fancy hotel. Anytime we need a fancy hotel, we can reuse the Park Manor hotel in Manhattan as that's going to be our fancy hotel. So as you know, when Frank came on the program, he talked about taking all these photos of Manhattan just before we launched the show. So I'm sure he sent photos of the plaza and other, top hotels to Japan for them to design the backgrounds on it. But I don't think there was ever any question. I mean, the Statue of Liberty, that's a public thing, or even the cloisters, that's a public thing. But the Plaza Hotel's owned by someone, and if we show that a bunch of gangsters are living there, right under the noses of management, they might not be happy about that.
And the image of the Chrysler Building, which I appreciate greatly, was there some commitment, Greg, to using iconic New York skyline images that would be recognizable in every episode or anything like that? Was there any
all the
conscious
time.
effort? Yeah.
Oh yeah, very conscious. Like I said, Frank Parr, the other producer on the show, went to Japan, talked to our Japanese partners, the folks at Walt Disney Animation Japan, who in Tokyo, who animated the show, all of the first season and most of the second as well. And on the way, he stopped in Manhattan. I can't remember if it was on the way there or on the way back. He told us, Greg, Jennifer, I don't know if you remember, but in any event, one direction or another, he stopped in Manhattan and he just took his camera. This is before we all had cell phone cameras, He took his camera and he went all around Manhattan and took hundreds and hundreds of photographs. When taking photographs was kind of more of a big deal than just pulling out your cell phone and pressing a single button, and running off 80 pictures.
You're right.
This was really
film was involved. A camera store was involved. The film developing.
Exactly.
You're right. So
we are the film developer.
So he just he wanted a specific angle or what have you, or
sometimes, but at any event, he wanted to give them as much reference as possible so that when they were designing backgrounds, when they were doing storyboards, they could refer to the reality of the place and so we talked a couple episodes ago about the statue of Alice in Wonderland in Central Park, or
right.
In a few episodes from now, we set almost the entire episode on the Twin Towers. Obviously, this was the 90s. It has a different effect on the audience today, but then it was just, this is the skyline of New York, and there are a lot of just skyline shots, particularly at the gargoyles gliding off across Manhattan, where you see very iconic buildings, Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, Pan Am Building. Remember the Pan Am Building?
Right. Greg, were they animating? Were they basing it on an animatic that you provided with the storyboard, or you said did they start from scratch?
Yeah,
so they were doing all the animation there.
Season 1, they did all of it. They did the boarding there too. We had someone on our end who did revisions, and Frank and I gave notes. But for all of season 1, they did all of pre-production, and production and animation in Japan. And we would just bring it back for post. So we would do the writing and the voice work here. By here, I mean Burbank. and then send it over to them, and we'd supervise everything from a distance. There were, again, a long time ago, a lot of faxes. Lots of faxes going back and forth. And because of the time difference between LA and Tokyo, any change took, a couple days to sort of work its way through. But yeah, they did all the pre-production. Then in season 2, we went, season 1, they only ordered 13 episodes. Season 2, they ordered 52 episodes, but gave us the same amount of time to make them.
Both of them.
As for season 1. And
that's so, I have to say it, that is so dumb.
That's what I thought.
That's so dumb. I mean, how soul crushing for you, Greg. I'm sorry you had to go through that. And whatever short-sighted individual thought that was a good idea, shame on them.
It was this thing, there was this meeting where they said, hey, how many, we want you to do 52 episodes for season 2. And keep in mind, they had not picked us up at all. And Gary, our boss, had ordered 6 scripts, even though there was no pickup, just like, all right, let's get 6 scripts going. Because the show was doing very well. But our syndication arm, Disney syndication arm, Buena Vista, had not picked us up for a second season. Gary's like, all right, I'll pay for 6 scripts out of my budget. And if the show doesn't go, I'll eat that cost. We'll write it off as a loss. So we were working on, Michael and I were working on 6 scripts, 6 stories. And so they came to us and said, we want 52. And I literally laughed in their face. This does not go over well. And I just said, yeah, that's totally not possible. Because it wasn't just that they wanted 52 episodes. They wanted 52 episodes all in the fall quarter between September and December. And I said, it's just not possible. It's just not physically possible. And they're like, well, all right, well, what is possible? And I said, well, I mean, we've got 6 scripts in the works. I know we can do 6, and we did 13 last season, so I'm confident we can do 13. And I think if we really pushed, and I sat there with a schedule in front of me, and I sort of quickly did the math, which is dumb because I'm not good at math. And I said, I came up with the somewhat arbitrary number of, I think we could squeeze out 18. For which their response was, nah. If you can't do 52, then just do the 6. And that was a bummer because I was hoping for 13. We were primed to do another season of 13. And they were like, just do 6. But we're like, okay, we got the pick up for 6. We'll do the 6. And then 2 weeks later, they called back and said, remember, you said you could do 13. And I'm like, yeah, that was 2 weeks ago, but sure, we can do 13. And then 2 weeks after that, they're like, remember, you said you could do 18. And I'm like, that was a month ago. You cost us a month. And they're like, you said you could do it. And I'm like, okay, I think we can do 18 in the first quarter. We'll do our best. And they're like, you can't do your best. You have to do it. And then 2 weeks after that, they called and said, the order's 52. So not only did we get the 52 order that I told them we couldn't do, but we didn't get that order until 6 weeks later. So we actually lost 6 weeks. So immediately we had to, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. I am. That's my fault. Probably I ran. But immediately we had to quadruple our staff. And so season 2, all the pre-production came back to LA, or 90% of it. Japan still did boards for a handful of episodes. Some of them were best, actually. But we created 4 story editing teams and 3 directing teams. And just expanded the show exponentially. And in the end, we got 31 episodes done for the fall quarter, which I thought was just amazing because I had said,
Wow.
I think we can maybe get 18 done.
Right.
We got 31 done. And they were so pissed at us because we didn't deliver 52. And I said at the time, I said, you guys remember I told you we wouldn't be able to have this. And they just pretended they had no memory of it. And
Of course,
they were furious
yeah.
with us for only delivering 31.
How convenient.
Yeah.
Well, that's how the sausage is made. And sometimes one of the sausage makers doesn't know a lot about making sausage, but yet they still get to put in the order. It's a heck of a business. And that was your baby though. That was your baby, Greg.
Yeah. That's true.
We turn into the episode Elisa flatlines in a very chilling act break.
Yeah, we've already been on the edge of our seat this whole time, and they actually take her to flatline. It was pretty intense.
Yeah.
Get out the old. We got the injection of the what is it?
The epinephrine with that giant syringe.
Yeah, that giant just hit her with a half gallon of that, and then get out the paddles. I mean, that ramped it up there. That was intense. Alan Richard
wanted to treat it as just. Sorry.
Go on.
I was just going to say, I just had to interject. I had the good fortune of being directed by Sally Richardson on an episode of a show called "I'm Dying Up Here." It was really great to see her again, and she's a terrific director.
It's been great watching Sally's career as a director. By the way, it was also a lot of fun seeing you with Craig on Young Sheldon.
Oh yeah, boy, that was something else. What an experience, and in a way even more heightened with all the COVID protocols and stuff on set.
Right. Yeah.
That was. Sometimes this business can just be so beautiful, and that was one of those moments of getting to work with him again.
All right, we keep pulling away from the episode, Greg. What did you want to say?
Okay, I was about to say I love the entire climax at the warehouse in Canal Street. It's a great action sequence, and Broadway's confession is just heartbreaking, and he's doing it not only to clear his conscience, but in a way to save the life of this sleazebag who New York might even be better off without.
That is a really honest, endearing moment from Broadway. Yeah, it's all about his character, right?
And brought through this whole episode, Broadway goes from this, he's having fun, and then he's sad, and then he's angry, and then in the end he's there's just so much shame. He goes through the whole gamut in this episode, and we just see so many sides of him.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and not your normal cartoon voiceover gig.
You didn't do a lot of that on Beethoven? Patrick had those moments, though.
For sure. In a different way, yeah.
No, I mean, we were trying to make the show that we would want to see, and so, you get that. The thing I love is the counterpoint, and again, all credit to Michael Reeves, who wrote the episode, the counterpoint between when Goliath first tells Broadway, not knowing what Broadway, that Elisa's been shot and the man responsible is in this building.
Yeah, that's great.
you see Broadway have this moment where it's like, oh wait, he doesn't know what happened. And so Broadway does not speak up. But then at the key moment, when Goliath is clearly about to kill this guy, he does speak up. In other words, when push comes to shove, he does. And then that's followed by the moment where Goliath says, a bit later in the episode, Tom, we need to go see Elisa. And Broadway says, you mean she's not dead? Because by this time, Broadway had gotten in his head that he'd killed her. And that the reason Goliath was so completely wrapped out of shape here was because Elisa was dead. So Broadway has this moment where, so she's not dead, and then Goliath is just silent because Goliath has now been away from the hospital long enough, and when he left her, she was in dire straits. And you realize Goliath doesn't know whether she's alive or not. And we know, the audience knows by this time that she's made it, but Goliath doesn't know and Broadway doesn't know. And that moment when they're leaving, is, I think, well, I mean, again, I'm biased because, I like the show, but, I just thought that moment, just plays me every time. There's a moment where Broadway gets all this hope and then Goliath's forced to take it away just by saying nothing.
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I do like when they get to her, though, like both Broadway and Elisa take responsibility for what happened. Broadway doesn't get 100% blamed for this, even though, like you said before, Elisa had no reason to lock up her gun before now. But they both take responsibility for it, and that's a huge moment between Elisa and Broadway.
Yeah, we wanted that to have consequences too. I mean, we show that Elisa and Broadway have a sort of special bond from that point on. Not that Elisa doesn't also like Brooklyn and Lex, but her relationship with Broadway is a little tighter. They've shared this trauma together and forgiven each other. And, so we made them just a little closer than she is, say, to Hudson or to Lex or Brooklyn. And then we also in future episodes show Elisa locking up her gun at night.
Wow.
We hadn't obviously done prior to this. So we wanted to follow through from this episode with, not just Elisa being on crutches but also with the relationship continue to evolve and also Elisa having learned a lesson from what happened before and changing her behavior.
Right.
Great scene. And I think it's gargoyle culture, stroking the hair is the equivalent of a kiss. Goliath kisses her while she's lying in the hospital bed.
Yeah, Goliath's kind of a dope, but he has feelings for her. He just hasn't figured it out yet. And some kisses are just as with human kisses, some kisses are more platonic than others, but still, there's a reason he goes so berserk when he's hurt.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a bit of a Xanatos plot throughout this episode, even though he doesn't appear. It's obvious by the end of the climax that Owen was pulling strings to get Goliath to retrieve the weapons for them.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out the way Owen planned. Goliath destroys all the weapons. But clearly Owen is doing his best Xanatos there, manipulating, not stylistically like Xanatos, but within character for Owen, going up to tell him just before sunrise, that he comes charging in once, the night has fallen again, and he says, hey, I've got to go. but this is the situation. Here's who's to blame. And sure enough, Goliath takes down the bad guys. What Owen doesn't count on is Goliath then destroying all the weapons at the end. But we also had that moment where Owen pulls out a piece of paper and says that there are 37 weapons unaccounted sold off on the street. And we saw Broadway destroy one of those.
Right.
But that leaves 36, and that was done intentionally so that later in the show, again, when S&T wouldn't allow us to use regular guns, we could show even, some crook or other using one of these 36 weapons out on the street because they had been disseminated and were out there and gone, So that again was Michael and I sort of planning ahead to, in essence, address an S&T problem. Like here.
Although throughout the series, we maintain a balance between both real guns and laser guns. I mean, Elisa never stops using the real guns. Some bad guys later who aren't associated with Xanatos use real guns. Broad comes to mind, and I always thought that was really cool. I mean, some characters had access to high-tech weapons and others didn't.
Right.
And also because we are geeks, Gargwiki did tally how many of those guns were taken out by the end of the series. 12 destroyed or recovered, so there's still a bunch more out there if you ever get back to it. We're nerds. We do that.
we have nothing better to do, so.
No, it's a terrific episode. I think its reception among the fandom is really strong. Occasionally I run into someone who says it wasn't an afternoon cartoon's place to do this, but overall it's one of the highlights of the series. I think it's one of the most popular episodes around. I mean, it was a terrific piece.
Yeah, I think it is. Also, I would disagree too. I think it is very much an afternoon cartoon's responsibility to do a show like this. I'm not saying every episode, but if you're going around doing an action show, you are in essence glorifying violence. And hey, I'm an entertainer when push comes to shove, so if something entertains, great. But every once in a while you have to step back and go, okay, what am I doing here? And so, if you can get a message across, in a way that isn't soapboxing, I guess. I think.
But it's a story. I mean, you are, we're engaged in storytelling, and that is, and
right.
The story told in that episode is not a fantasy. It is a very real part of our culture, and so it's not
right.
a story that no one's going to say, well, that could never happen. That's a part of our world, and to acknowledge that. In my mind, I think it's important.
I agree. And one thing I'd also like to just throw out there, this is complete non sequitur, but I just think it's fun. The movie Showdown that Broadway watches before he shoots somebody.
Yeah.
I always get a huge kick out of that. That's sort of, there's the two characters, and one of them is clearly sort of Clint Eastwood based, and yet when Broadway's playing with the gun, he does a John Wayne.
Full John Wayne.
Right.
In there. So I'm like really interested in this movie Showdown. What exactly was in that movie?
It was the heat of westerns.
Right, and it's in black and white, but it's a new movie.
It's new to them.
It's new to them. I always wondered, was it actually a new movie, shot in black and white, or was it an old movie that at a revival theater.
Revival
and I also
theater,
want to
yeah.
know. I also want to know what's the deal with popcorn.
Yeah, how did that happen?
It's like
Popcorn.
packaged popcorn, and I was thinking about it last night. I said, okay, I don't know if I have this rationale back in the day, but my rationale last night was that they had a very temperamental popcorn machine downstairs serving fresh popcorn. So in an emergency, the balcony was closed, right? You know, we closed the balcony, it's condemned or whatever. But in an emergency, if our old popcorn machine breaks down, you run upstairs and you start selling this prepackaged popcorn. And it's not as good, but, you know, people are desperate for popcorn when they go to movies. So that's our backup plan. And that is my rationale for why there are bags of already pre-popped popcorn out on the goddamn balcony. But
works for me.
I also want to point out the music is fascinating. The score of Showdown is fascinating because it is a mix it's all Carl Johnson music, right? But it is a mix of stuff from the medieval pilot, you know, and somehow it works in the Western, and that is Mark Perlman, our music editor at the time, pulling from our library of these little clips that could somehow, you know, taking out of that big score of our pilot and the section of the pilot that was set in 994, right? In medieval times, in the Dark Ages, pulling out a piece that he thought this will work in the Western, and then this one cue that's very much like out of Bonanza or Big Valley or something like this. That sort of that clearly Carl did just for that bit there. And to me, it works really well. Like the moment of the actual showdown on the streets of Laredo or wherever the hell it was supposed to be, you know, you hear this hype music that you're kind of like, and it works. And if you don't know the show at all, you're like, wow, that's a great choice to make. But I know that it's like, okay, that was from the medieval version of the pilot.
And here I was thinking it was like a Tarantino type approach.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about Showdown because I just watching it last night. I'm like, this is really weird and fun. This sort of strange.
There's a lot of detail for just the little setup that we're getting.
I know. It was funny. So, anyway.
And shifting away from the episode, you two have worked together on pretty much everything that Greg has produced since then. I mean, and which is good. Greg finds a great actor, and I love that he keeps bringing you back. I mean, you were on, Jen and I were talking about this earlier, Roughnecks, which unfortunately I have never had the opportunity to see. 3 by 3 Eyes.
I shunned him for this.
In my defense, it did not air in my area for some reason, so I didn't see it. And then by the time I tried to buy the DVD, it was out of print and going for $500 on the aftermarket.
Holy cow! Wow.
Yeah, I gave my set away to my boyfriend's son, and I regretted it ever since. Could have got $500 for it from Greg. You know what his problem was, Greg? Is he was too nice. I couldn't handle it. You know how I have that problem. But we were talking. He was on Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice. And Bashansky had forgotten about 3 by 3 Eyes. All the stuff you worked on together.
Always a pleasure to work with Craig. Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to work with Bill. I mean, it makes it sound like I'm some kind of, I'm so nice to bring these guys back all the time. And it's just totally selfish. I know I'm going to get a great performance there. I mean, it's got nothing to do with like me being a good person. I hope to be a good person someday, but really it's complete selfishness. You know, I know Bill delivers every time. And, So, bringing him back to play Bear on Young Justice is like a no-brainer. He's so good in the role. He's so funny. And yet, when the moment comes for Bear to get serious or for Bear to break your heart, you can do that too. And so why wouldn't I? Again, purely out of selfishness, go back everything.
That was fun. Yeah. And there's a reason why I'm not going. No, I got something else to do. So, no, it's when you find people you enjoy working with, that's such a critical part to just having a satisfying career in this bizarre.
And most of those you mentioned also were directed by Jamie Thomason, and
right.
And so, just watching Jamie and I together is entertainment in and of itself.
Yeah.
But
I can confirm that. Yes.
You also did another show where you played a very Broadway-like character. It was 2007, 2008. Transformers animated. You were Bulkhead. He was a big guy. He was green.
Oh yeah, that was very, very similar to a lot of similarities to Broadway there.
He was even
big softy guy.
He was even part of a trio, and Jeff Bennett was a motorcycle.
That's right.
No, it was a great.
Jeffy.
Yeah, it was a great show, but I remember thinking if they had cast Tom Adcox as Bumblebee, that would have been perfect. And then you had the grizzly older veteran, Ratchet, and the leader, and
I just saw Bumper Robinson not too long ago.
Bumper was great as Bumblebee. I'm not saying they cast the wrong guy. I'm just saying.
No, I know what you're saying. It's just funny because I wound up with a nice friendship with Bumper.
Yeah.
We're both big Ram fans.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And I think the showrunner on that was Marty Eisenberg, who was also a Gargoyles veteran.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Marty wrote for us, for sure.
Yeah. Right.
Bob Skirt.
It all gets it's a small animated world.
Yeah.
Getting bigger all the time.
Well,
man.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, for sure. It's been really interesting to see with all the different developments, whether it's streaming services or COVID, animation seems to thrive in all of them. It's such a remarkable form of entertainment.
Indeed. Is there anything else about this episode that we haven't covered before we begin to wrap things up?
No, I'm very happy to come aboard your vessel here and share memories and reflections on this episode with Greg. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
An honor and a pleasure, and we hope that someday in this era of 90s revivals that Greg gets to do a third season of Gargoyles, and a proper third season of Gargoyles, and you get to return as Broadway and pick up that particular story.
All right. Well, you guys take care, and Greg, we'll see you around the campus, and everyone hang in there.
Does anyone have anything they want to plug before we say goodbye?
Sure. I'll plug Catwoman.
Oh, I didn't know you were asking Greg. Yeah, go, Greg.
I'll plug Catwoman Hunted, which comes out on Blu-ray, DVD, and on demand on February 8th.
It'll be out before this goes up.
Stars Elizabeth Gillies. That'll be before this goes up?
Yeah, this will be up in late March.
Okay, well then it's out now. Go get it.
Nice.
It's
smooth.
I wrote it. I'm really proud of it. It's an anime-style Catwoman movie starring Elizabeth Gillies as Catwoman and Stephanie Beatriz as Batwoman. And I think folks will like it. And then if this is airing in March, sometime around this time, that is the spring of 2022, the second half of the fourth season of Young Justice will also start dropping on HBO Max in the spring. So we'll either be, They'll either have started dropping or will be very, very close to the mark.
Some good stuff to look forward to.
Nice.
Yep.
Hashtag keep binging YJ. Hashtag keep binging gargoyles. And Bill, do you have anything you would like to promote?
That's right.
No, just everyone be good to each other.
That's the best thing a person can promote.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
And Jennifer, do you have anything you want to promote?
Don't have anything going on. Go to my website, www.heyassbutt.com.
Hey, ass butt.
And you can find all the stuff that I'm selling there. But other than that, I'm just waiting for Greg to hire me.
This was a phenomenal episode, a seminal episode of the series.
I'm so excited.
I'm so glad we got to talk about it together. And Bill, I'm so glad that you were here to discuss it. And I want to thank you, Greg. I want to thank you also. And Jennifer, thank you for being a perfect partner in crime. We shall be doing more crime together soon. And we will be back with Greg to discuss Enter Macbeth, a fairly important episode. Stuff happens there. And talk to you all soon. Be good to each other, as Bill said.
Bye.
Mr. Xanatos isn't going to like this.
I'll be happy to discuss the matter with him.